Louisiana Teacher of the Year, who is also a former Beta member, and she is going to she's going to talk to you. She is a phenomenal person. I would encourage you to listen very, very closely to her story and to welcome her, but pay real close attention to her message, and please give her your undivided attention. Miss Joni Smith.
Quick mic check. How are y'all? I hope that you caught the words. I feel like I'm with my people because I'm a former Beta student as well, so I love being here with you all. I was told earlier there are roughly around 6,000 people in this room right now, so I just want to take a moment and give you all an applause. Thank you so much for your hard work. And before I get started, I want to tell you something. Side note conversation. Any Luke Combs fans in the house? Okay. Thanks to my boyfriend, we'll be attending a Luke Combs concert as well, but if you don't know it, it's occurring right here, and I'm standing on the same stage that Luke Combs will be standing on, so I feel like I've made it. Okay? So if you know Luke Combs or you follow him on Twitter, please let him know that I beat him to his stage. Tonight, what I'd like to do with you guys is I just want to talk to you, but I don't want to talk to you as a person. I want to talk to you as an individual who has a heart like mine. So I hope that my message pulls on your heartstrings. So I am going to ask you this. The teacher heart in me is going to ask you to pay close attention to the words that I share with you. And if you have something that's distracting you at this moment, I'm going to ask you to put it away for just a moment. Thank you so much. As I was introduced, Dr. Leger mentioned that my name is Joni Smith. I'm currently administrative assistant at Westside Junior High in Livingston Parish. I was a former science teacher at middle school level. I know I have some students in the house right now. Shout out to y'all. I saw you earlier. You're growing up, please stop. You're beautiful. I'm so happy to see y'all. It's always nice to see the success walk you are taking. So what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is I'm going to be a storyteller. Okay? And I'm going to share a few stories with you that I think are pretty incredible in my own life and also in ours as well. And they're going to circle around the idea of the power of relationships. I know we all have this, so we can all relate to this conversation, how relationships have been impactful to you and what they do to you. And most times when we hear the word relationships, we think of something, whether we think of a person or an item or what it may be, but I think of two words. And those two words are impact and connection. Relationships have been incredibly impactful in my life and have connected me to stronger things. And I know of a person that has also been impacted by relationships in a very peculiar way, and I can't wait to share his story with you because I think you're going to like it. The person that you see on the screen is named Antoine Yates. And he is a person that is quite unique in his mannerisms and his personality type and the way he builds relationships. So I'm going to share his story with you. This man lived in Harlem, New York, and he lived in the 21st story of an apartment building. And one day, the tenants below him were complaining about loud sounds, excessively loud sounds, and that water was leaking from their ceiling. So naturally, they called the landlord and submitted all these complaints day after day, week after week. Nothing was being done. So finally, the tenants below him got so frustrated with no action being taken and constantly being annoyed by loud sounds and fluid that was coming down from the top levels. And as the water dripped down, it began to cause them problems in their own apartment building. So they end up calling New York City Police, which you can imagine in that area, this isn't on the top of their list. So naturally, it took them a while to get there. But when they finally show up, let me tell you what the interesting moments that occurred next. These police officers banged on the door of Antoine Yates, and he would not answer. They could hear loud sounds. They knew in their hearts that something was different. This didn't feel right. So naturally, they called in for backup, and thankfully they did because they were going to need it. When they looked through a peephole that they had drilled through the door, they saw a large eyeball looking back at them. And when I say large, this sucker was like the size of a pool ball looking back at them. So granted, they were scared, naturally, but they had to put their police officer face on and be brave and be able to tackle whatever situation was behind the door. They were going to be ready. They attempted to break down the door, but decided that maybe this isn't the best idea, so they recanted. And thankfully they did. So what they did instead, because of the curiosity and the unknown that was behind this door, they decided to rappel on the side of the building. So what they did is, as they rappelled down the building and got to the correct apartment and could see through the window on the outside, this is what they saw. A 500-pound Bengal tiger was living with this man in his apartment building in New York City. Not only was a 500-pound Bengal tiger living with this man, he also had an alligator. Louisiana, proud. So with this exotic animal relationship he was having in this apartment building, it was such a neat relationship to me because, one, it's peculiar, two, it's fatal, but also he was so in need of compassion and showing passion for these animals that he didn't want them to be hurt. So he screamed out to the police officers, screaming, "Please don't hurt me." That was the name of his tiger. "Please don't hurt me. He's my friend. Please don't hurt him." So they decided to see, and I don't know if you caught it in the picture, but they decided to actually use tranquilizer guns to seduce Ming into a coma-like state so that they could get him out of the building. And trying to draw a picture and imagine moving a 500-pound tiger out of an apartment building in New York City, I'm sure it was a feat in itself. And then discovering that they had other exotic animals in the building with him was a true surprise. But this man, Antoine Yates, was very interesting because he had disconnected from society. He struggled building relationships with people, but he did not struggle building relationships with animals. He found peace with them, he adored them, wanted to keep them safe. Now, you and I, we look at this story and we think, wow, how's that even a possibility? How can you have such a deep bond, such a deep-rooted connection with an animal, especially something that can, in one other breath rather, it can take your life. But he did, because the power of connection can be impactful. This is a picture of Ming being removed from the apartment building, and you can see a small clip of his body, and he's in a coma-like state, and they're having multiple people trying to put him into this ambulance, and he can't fit. So they had to transport him to the veterinarian's office with the ambulance doors wide open and tie him down. That should give you an idea of how large this animal was. You know, and I think about Antoine Yates and the power that he had of being able to build a trusting relationship with wild animals, being able to live in a home with them, and build a relationship so strong that they were not eating him, they were not harming him. Their relationship was solid in the sense of a friendship. My next story I'd like to share with you is of people. And it's a family that I'd like to share with you tonight in regards to pulling on your heartstrings just a little bit. So this family, the Reed family, they had 3 children. They were raised here in South Louisiana, and these are their 3 children. And looking at this picture, it looks like they were born in the 70s. Would you agree? Is this anything you'd like to wear on the weekend? No? No takers? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this story. So the younger brother is now a grown individual, very successful in life, and he works for the State Department. He is the Deputy Director for the Office of Technology Services in our state. Very successful young man, and is continuing to climb the chain of command and doing very well. Has a happy family and thriving. But you wouldn't know that because if I rewound his life to those elementary years, he was expelled in 5th grade for punching his principal. And the reason why he was expelled in 5th grade for punching his principal is because his principal was so upset of him coming to the office so often, he got frustrated and yelled at him, and then the child decided to retaliate by punching the principal. We all know what happens when that occurs. This child was troubled, he had a lot of pain, it was hidden, he didn't know how to express it, life was difficult, and unfortunately he didn't know how to let those emotions out in a proper way. Inside classrooms, you see people like this, don't you? You see hurting people that are desperate to build relationships with others and just may not know exactly how to do that. But I'm here to tell you that this can happen. People that have rough pasts, can actually develop really strong, successful futures. Do you know that 30% of you in this room have a trauma-filled background, statistically speaking? When you look around at people in the row that are next to you, you may not know their past, you may not know where they came from or the struggles they face each and every day, but look at where they are right now. You're on a path for success for a reason. Moving along to the oldest sister, This young lady is now the current title holder for a team leader, and also she runs the Gulf States Department of DSLD homes in our area. Grew up to be a very successful young lady as well, has a beautiful family, thriving in the community. But you wouldn't know that when she was your age. She wasn't a beta student. She kind of flew below the radar, made C's and D's in the classroom, struggled to build relationships in the beginning, and also she became to be attracted to the bad boys, so to speak. So she was migrating toward a path that was going to doom her future. She was struggling to express her emotions. She was struggling to get her feelings out, and also continued to have backlash problems in the classroom, lived in the principal's office as well. Struggled every single day with building positive, successful relationships with others. But you wouldn't know that looking at that picture, because she has positive relationships in her family, within her own family. She has positive relations in her workforce, and everyone that she meets would say that she's a blessing to be a part of their life. So let me stop here for just a moment and wrap up those two individuals. The beauty of this story so far is these children were in a broken home. And something I didn't say just yet was the part that I'm about to lead to is so impactful for me, because I want you to know that what you didn't know about these two small children that we've mentioned, their family was broken. And I know many people in this room right now come from broken homes, and you have struggled with that, and that has been on your heart, and it may even be thought processes in the classroom or wherever you may go. These two children were also victims of a traumatic event, and when it occurred in their lives, they took a turn for the worse. And if you were to predict their lives, you would have said, these people are going to end up on the streets. They're going to end up down a drug-ridden path. They're going to end up struggling with alcoholism. They're going to struggle with some type of addiction, because they're built for that. They're suited for that. Their past is pointing them in that direction. But yet, here they are, thriving and succeeding with relationships. The middle child. She became a middle school science teacher at Westside Junior High, and then moved on to teach at Albany Middle School. She became the administrative assistant at Westside Junior High this past year. 2 years ago, she was named the 2017 Louisiana State Teacher of the Year. 2018, she was named the Louisianian of the Year. 2019, she was named Southeastern Young Alumnus of the Year. What you're looking at is a picture of me and my two children. I'm not gonna cry. It's not gonna happen. And I love telling this story because what you don't know is this. When I was little, I struggled quite so. And any student that knows me would never know this about me, because I don't share a lot of the difficulty that I faced as a child. But I faced a lot of adversity, and this is what I'm going to share with you tonight. I failed kindergarten. It still hurts to say that. It does. I don't even want my kids to know it, but it's true. I failed kindergarten, but I color like a beast. So let me just make sure that's clear, okay? I did fail kindergarten. I was a little bit hyper in the classroom. They thought I had ADD, but really they just didn't know I was fun. And I enjoyed coloring, and I didn't want to take tests because coloring was more fun. I also suffered the worst tragedy when I was 9 years old. At 9 years old, I lost my very best friend, and that was the person that I called my mom. When I say this was my best friend, I truly mean it, because some of you can relate to that, where you're so close with one of your parents that you couldn't imagine living your life without them. Well, that was my mom for me. We were two peas in a pod. Everything we did was together. If she was dancing in the living room or in the kitchen, I was dancing right beside her. If she was cooking, I was standing next to her. I was her assistant. But she was my best friend, and the person that I looked up to the most. And when I tell you, boy, did she love us, she loved us. But when she died, the most painful experience I ever had in my entire life thus far was getting a phone call from my dad when I was sick one day, laying on the couch, and my dad calls me, and I want you to hear this part because this is a turning point. And he says to my oldest sister, who you saw a picture of, and he says, I just want you to know that I killed your mom, and you're never gonna see her again. That man, when he said those words, they have echoed in my head for years, truly years, and it took me years to even forgive him. But thinking of that moment sends chills down my spine, and I'm 35 years old, and I still struggle saying those words because it changed my life. It was a huge turning point, and I wanted to give up on everything I knew. I wanted to take my own life. I didn't want to live without her. She was my best friend, my mom. How could I live without her? And I surely didn't want to live knowing that this man survived. My dad that killed my mom? No, I didn't want to be on this earth anymore. So naturally, I struggled with depression. I struggled with all the sadness. I struggled building relationships with other kids. I didn't want to open up. I became the quiet kid in the classroom. I just struggled. It was there, it was present. People were a little hesitant to ask me what was wrong. I'm sure because they didn't want to know. Because I probably wore my emotions on my sleeve like I do as an adult. They probably could see it all over my face. But when I look back at this, I think of the things that I had to grow through, the adversity I had to face. When I was 11 years old, I got placed with my grandmother. We kind of bounced around to different family members. It was such a sad experience because we felt neglected and unwanted because we'd move around to different family members until they didn't want us anymore. And then at this one time when we had moved to my grandmother's house, if you know where Denham Springs is, it's not that far. We moved to Denham Springs. I changed schools. It was tough. So remember those new kids in the classroom? Be good to those kids. They're struggling. And when I moved in with her, it was so difficult because she was currently living in the home that my mother was killed in. So imagine sleeping at night when all I could think about was hearing those sounds, knowing that my father, the man that helped create me, that was supposed to be a leader in the family, that was supposed to love me unconditionally and protect me, had stolen the one person that I loved most. I loved her most. And I couldn't help but naturally fill my heart with hatred toward him, naturally. And I wanted vengeance. I remember thinking, like, I can't do this because I can't survive knowing he's alive. I can't. So when it came time for testifying, I wanted to be first in the courthouse. I wanted to testify against my own father. I wanted the death sentence. I wanted vengeance. I did. My heart did at that time. He was sentenced to a life sentence in Angola prison, and he did die in prison. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that portion in a second, but the saddest thing of this whole story and knowing that moment of tragedy in my life is knowing that I had people that I had built strong relationships that cared for me. My siblings cared for me, very much so, and I fought hard for them as well. Being put into the foster care system and being bounced around. If you know anyone that's been in the system before, you know all they want is their siblings. That's all they want. They want to be placed in a home, a loving home, a supportive home, but they want their siblings. And so I was so thankful to finally find a home after being bounced around a few years that would actually take me and my youngest brother. My oldest sister had moved on to live with a friend of our family. And so to know that I got at least one of my siblings, I was so happy and so content. Now I do wish I could say that my adoptive years were amazing years and my adoptive family was wonderful, but unfortunately that's not the case. I didn't have a good relationship with them. There was no true bond of love there. So over time we drifted, and to this day we still don't have a connection, and that's okay. Because you know what I did? When I became an adult, I decided to give back in the same way that I wanted to be loved as a child, and I adopted a kid. My daughter's here tonight. Marilyn. Y'all see this sweet little girl in the middle of the room waving to me? That's my baby. Next to my son and my man. Hey girl. Actually, share a sweet moment, February 11th, I will have that baby for 2 years. That's her gotcha day. So proud of her. Yeah. So, just to speak back into your heartstrings and pull on you a little bit, I want you to think about the relationships you've built thus far in your life. Because something we haven't talked about is how I built a relationship with the man that I hated most, my father. His name was John Reed. He passed away when I was 27, and I can tell you the exact moment when it happened, and where I was, and what I was wearing, and all these things, because it hurt. And I didn't think it would, because I thought that I would feel complete. I thought that I would be happy, and I thought that, I would have peace. But no, I'll tell you what really happened. I felt this overwhelming sense of being an orphan. I felt this overwhelming sense of I didn't have enough time. But I will say, when I became a mother, I decided to go visit him in Angola, and I was on a path of forgiveness. And y'all, if I could tell you anything tonight, I tell you, learn to forgive. It'll give you the most amount of peace you've ever experienced. And when I was able to forgive this man, he passed away 3 months later. It took me a while, because I didn't forgive him until I was in my early 20s. But when I did, I had peace. And when he passed, I had to listen, truly listen to these people give their eulogy and give a speech about my father, and they were all inmates at Angola prison, and they spoke about this man that I never knew. And they said all kind things, that he was a leader in the area, and that he would give things to them for free. And they don't do that in prison, no. And that he was so kind and so loving and supportive, and he was a trustee, and that he had turned his life around, and he was leading Bible studies, and he was doing all these great things because he was trying to build a relationship with the children that hated him. So he made his life goal to change his life in a direction where his children could forgive him. And it was very helpful, because I cried incredibly amounts of tears that night listening to these strangers talk about a man I never knew, that I called Dad, and they knew him best. They knew him in a different light, a different person. They had built strong relationships and strong connections with this man that I never knew. And I'll be honest, I'll tell you, I was jealous. I was jealous that they got the father that I always wanted. They got the man that I should have had in my life, that shouldn't have taken the life of my mother, shouldn't have separated all the kids, shouldn't have embedded so much trauma and so much pain into our lives. But unfortunately, I didn't get to see that side of him, but I did get to hear it. And when I say it helped me with forgiveness, it truly did. And so to stand here with a clean heart, knowing that I was able to forgive a man that hurt me most, is so powerful to me. I told you relationships were impactful. I'm also going to share with you a picture of my mother, because I can't help but do it. This was the day that my mother passed away. It means a lot to me to have her picture in my home and on my phone, and to visit her gravesite on her anniversary and also on her birthday as well. But this woman also struggled with relationships, because when I look back and think about her life, she loved us so much. She loved her kids so much that she would not leave this controlling, toxic relationship she was in with my father. She loved us that much. When I wish that I could turn the hands of the clock back in time, and I would change it. I would say, leave them, it's fine. We can do this, you can be a single mom and we'll be fine. I don't want to lose you, but I never thought it was that big of a deal. I would have never have guessed I would have got a phone call that day like I did. But it happened. Because trauma doesn't pick people who are well in valor. It knows no creed, it just happens. And we're never ready for it. But we have to be a little bit proactive and understand that this is something that is happening to people around us, our loved ones, people that are sitting to your left, people that are sitting to your right, in front of you, behind you. There's a saying that says, you never know what people are going through, so treat them well. Have you heard that before? Isn't that true? Because let me tell you what else. I got to go to the White House a year and a half ago, probably the biggest moment of my life in my career. Even though my students, I thought they were going to be super excited when I came back, and the first question they asked me was, how does Donald Trump smell? I'm still upset about that. It's a fact, by the way. Then they asked me if his hair was real, and I couldn't answer it. But when I stood in the Oval Office, this is a true story. When I stood in the Oval Office, I started crying. And I hate to cry in front of people, I do. And tears started to go to my face, and I was so upset because the media was there, and I felt so special. I'm in the Oval Office, like, I didn't want to cry. But tears started dropping down my face, and my friend next to me, she's like, you okay? And I said, no. And so when we walked out into the Rose Garden, into the dressing room, and I was reflecting on the moment and why I was even crying. And one of my friends said, Joni, are you okay? What's wrong? And I said, y'all, I shouldn't even be here. My cards in life weren't dealt for this. I'm supposed to be on a drug-ridden path, addicted to something, having all these illegitimate children. I was supposed to fall. Like, my life was set up for that. I was supposed to fall. But I didn't. I stood in the Oval Office proudly, with tears in my eyes, as an educator making an impact in the world so that I can affect young people like those over there and make a difference in their life. Because what's so important to me is the type of footprint that I leave behind. I want to make a difference in this world. Just because the cards in my life weren't dealt very well, it doesn't mean that I can't make an impact in someone else's life. I want to be inspiring. I want to make sure that I'm remembered in a way that's a positive attribute to society. I'm going to skip ahead from these pictures. So I want to ask you a question. My question is this. What's your vision? You're beta students. You've already been successful thus far, but what's next? What's next for you? What's your vision? Because I'm going to tell you, this is mine. I want all young people, and I'll say young because you are young, to recognize that no matter how difficult your day is, you get a second chance. You do. It's called tomorrow. You're gonna stumble, you're gonna fall sometimes, you're gonna make mistakes, and that's okay. Because we all get a second chance, and it's such a beautiful opportunity for us to fix our mistakes and learn and grow together. Build your character, polish one another, lean on each other. So this is my call to action. This is why I feel compelled to be an educator as so. There's a great quote by Josh Shipp. If you ever get an opportunity to look up the work of Josh Shipp, you should do it, because he has a very powerful story as well. And he says, every kid, that means you, that means the person next to you, that means your neighbors, the kids down the road, the kids at school that you may not love so much. Every kid, notice that word. I want you to be mindful of that very first word in this quote, every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. Who's your caring adult? You have them, lean on them, thank them, feed into them, and then become them. So in the spirit of teaching, as always, I'm sorry y'all, but here's your homework. All right, so my homework is I'm gonna charge you with some actions, and this is what they are. Number one, it's not multiple choice, just a call to action, directive. Don't put an expiration date on your success. This isn't the end for you and you know it. Don't put an expiration date. Just because you struggle, just because you fall, just because you have a hard time, it's gonna come, it will, but don't stop that. You've got to overcome those obstacles and see them as a challenge here and now that's present, but you can overcome it. Because you're not gonna put an expiration date on it. Only you can control your future, no one else. Never allow your past to determine your future. I'm living proof of that. I shouldn't be on this stage right now. Luke Holmes, you have no idea. But I'm living proof of knowing that your past is not a definitive answer or a prediction of what your future can be. You are, not your past. Your past is not a crutch. Your past is not a definitive answer. Your past is not a determining factor. You are. You determine your future and no one else. And last but not least, and I mean this with all my heart, be careful when challenging someone who failed kindergarten to a coloring contest, because I will beat you with a smile on my face. Thank you so very much for having me tonight. I can't even tell you how it feels to be up here. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Louisiana, baby, get on your feet. One more big round of applause for Miss Joni.